and welcome to another episode of the Monday Book Club. This week we're going back to the start of the cyberpunk era of science fiction with William Gibson's Neuromancer. In 1983, a newcomer writer had a big problem. He'd been commissioned to write his debut novel, but he didn't think he was up to it just yet. He'd written a bunch of short stories, and they had sold well, but he still thought he needed a few more stories under his belt before he got down to tackling the problem of a full-length novel. This wasn't the end of William Gibson's problems either. He had a year to write the novel according to his contract, and when he'd written a third of it, he saw the film Blade Runner. The visual style of that film was the visual style he was going for in his novel Neuromancer. In his own words, he figured Neuromancer was sunk. Everyone would assume he cropped the look and feel of his story from the Philip K. Dick film. The problem Gibson was facing was that he was ahead of his time. Yes, Blade Runner had the visual style he was going for, but when you compare the science fiction in Blade Runner with the science fiction Gibson presented in Neuromancer, there's simply no comparison. They have the same visuals, but under those visuals is a completely different subject matter. Gibson was years ahead of his time, and as a result, he had a mammoth task in front of him to present to us the world of the future. He rewrote the first third of his novel over a dozen times, each time fearful that he would lose the reader's interest. You can see when you read the novel why he might be fearful of this. The dialogue in the book is heavy on future slang. There are terms littered across almost every page that are simply not explained. Terms that in the 1980s, when even the most die-hard of science fiction fans could still be regularly found without a computer in their home, the average reader simply would not have the background knowledge to understand. Gibson wasn't just inventing a new world for us to explore in his story, he was creating a new language, a language of high technology, but also of the street and the criminal underworld. It's no wonder he had so many problems getting it right. But get it right he did. From the moment we set foot in Chiba City, Japan, and see the world through the eyes of protagonist Henry Dorset Case, we are thrown into a world of intrigue, film noir double-crosses, enough corporate wrongdoing to make even the most jaded 80s cynic blush, and artificial intelligence. Every single twist and turn of this novel is written in Gibson's trademark weird style, heavily influenced by 1950s beat poetry, and helping to make the novel feel like something not of our time. If there's one thing about Neuromancer that stands it out from the crowd above anything else, it's how its influence has seeped into so many parts of modern life. Hackers took the slang Gibson invented and used it as their own. Programmers set about making the technology he discussed real. If you've ever heard of someone cracking a system, entering cyberspace, or using ice to prevent a hacker gaining control over a system, it's because of William Gibson. Neuromancer and its prequel short story Burning Chrome essentially form the base language of the internet, which is amazing considering the fact that William Gibson wrote the story on a typewriter and didn't use a computer himself until the 90s. Or perhaps it's not that amazing, considering that there is actually very little discussion in the novel about computers themselves. Gibson's view of cyberspace and computing technology was so far removed from reality in Neuromancer that it's more akin to magic, and many of the things he describes in the book still do not exist today, although many technologies have been invented since because of the inspiration people have drawn from the book. The book itself spends a lot of its time world-building and discussing the personal interplays between the characters, keeping the technology in the background for large chunks of the story. We are presented with a rich backdrop of a noir-esque world that is essentially being allowed to die while megacorporations build vast dynasties for themselves. Our protagonist, Case, is a washed-up hacker who can't hack anymore because of a scam he was running that went wrong, leaving him essentially crippled due to mycotoxins in his body that will kill him if he re-enters the Matrix, the computer world. He's getting by slumming it in Chiba City, Japan, thus preempting the 90s craze for Japan that would embody the early days of the internet's rise to prominence. It's quite prescient in that way. While slumming it, he meets Molly Millions, a street samurai, a title that conjures up more evocative images about what her job actually is than will ever actually get presented in this book, and ex-military guy Armitage. Armitage presents Case with an opportunity of a lifetime. Do one more job, and he'll cure Case, allowing him to jack into the Matrix again and giving him his life back. How can he turn that down? Thus, the twists and turns of the plot can begin. Throughout the standard heist-type plot, we are able to navigate some dense text, all written in a beat prose poetry style that takes quite a bit of getting used to. There are the standard twists and turns you'd expect if you're familiar with film noir or cyberpunk, either through film or novels, and the various characters on both the protagonists and the antagonist sides, because it's difficult to really call anyone a good guy in this story. They're all either villains or anti-heroes at best, have side plots that interweave, either coming to fruition in the denouement or being left dangling at the end, giving the novel a more realistic feel than I expected, because life doesn't wrap up cleanly. Despite the jargon Gibson has invented here becoming clearer and easier to understand over the decades since the book was published, Neuromancer is still not an easy read. Gibson's writing style is difficult, but ultimately worth the effort to get used to. It's a dense book, and it needs a lot of unpacking to really get the full benefit of the world that he's conjured up here. While I can understand that this won't be to everyone's taste, I personally found it a fascinating and highly enjoyable read when I first picked it up in the early 90s, and I still recommend it today. Okay, yeah, William Gibson's Neuromancer. It's one of those books that it's really, really dense, and sometimes you'll find it difficult to read, but it is well worth giving it a try. And I personally loved it when I read it the first time in the 90s, and I still like it now, so I think you probably will too. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you did like this, and if you did, remember to click the like button. Share it with your friends so that they know a good book when they see it, and do subscribe for future videos because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Kirk-Robinson. You've been watching the Monday Book Club on ZJKR, and I'll see you next time.